And then I'll try sharing my screen, Bartlett, so you have the agenda up.
All right. I believe we have quorum, so we'll do a roll call in a moment, but we'll start by calling the meeting to order. I have 6:05 on my clock, Thursday, February 10th, 2022. Welcome, everyone, and for the recording. Let's do the roll call. Do I just call them off? Or we just record who's here?
You can call them off if you want, Bartlett. I can help you out if need be.
All right, well, Rebecca is absent. We heard about that. Tom Yost, no sign or sign of Tom, right? Kathleen.
I'm here.
Excellent. Cornell. I saw him. There he is. Did you say here? Okay, and I'm here. And Cricket. Abigail
Here.
Gage, I guess would be.
There
Excellent.
it is. Yep.
Emily, do I see Emily? Yep, there's Emily.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, and then Chief Hellenbrand is obviously here. Captain Glazier and Kakutsky, which I always butcher.
Here,
Did I miss anyone?
Lynn Enders, our office manager, is also.
Oh, and Lynn.
She-
Sorry, Lynn.
She takes the minutes.
Okay, so we're missing two of our citizens on this. We'd have no idea what's up with Tom. Rebecca, we know, called in, but I do think we still have yeah, we do. We have a majority of the citizens. I think we can proceed. Are there any citizens we've heard from for public comment? I see none on the line. Anybody heard from anybody?
I did not receive any emails for people wishing to make a public comment.
Okay. Moving on with the minutes. These were produced to the committee about a week ago, I think, by Lynn. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to review them. I did. I will entertain a motion for approval. Unless you want a moment to read through them.
Bartlett, I think Cornell tried to make a motion, but Cornell, we can't hear you. I'm not sure if something's going on with your mic. Still can't hear you.
How about now?
Yay, gotcha.
Oh, we can hear you.
Yeah. I second it. That's what I was trying to say.
Nice. So I didn't catch for Emily, who made the motion? Oh, no one made a motion.
I can make that motion. I'll have Cornell second me or vice versa, whichever.
Excellent. Very good. All right. So with that, all those in favor? Any opposed? Moving on. Okay, agenda. Chief, it is yours to run to give us updates on stats.
Perfect. Thanks, Bartlett. I won't spend a lot of time on this. As you mentioned, this went out to all of you about a week ago and you had a chance to peruse it, but please ask any questions. I'll just kind of point out a few areas, highlight a few things in the stats. We'll go down to our total calls for service for the year, which is in 2021, you see is just over 18,000. Please disregard the 2019 total because that is not accurate. I will reach out to our data analyst and see why it lists 16,000 because that should be around 21,000. But we are a little bit higher than 2020, which to be expected because 2020, again, with COVID, we saw our numbers pretty much drop to zero for a month or two when COVID first hit. But we are seeing a gradual increase of calls for service, which I figured we would, but we're still not where we were prior to COVID hitting the area, but we are definitely seeing an increase of calls. The violent crime is 130, which is a little bit higher in 2021 compared to some of the previous years. Again, don't pay too much attention to 2019 because I'm a little concerned that that might not be accurate with the number above that's off. I'll look into that, but definitely an increase compared to 2020. Most of those were related to sex offenses. I can pull it up. Some sex offenses and some of those assaults and aggravated assault and simple assaults were up a little bit. One encouraging thing is if you look at the weapon violations, we only had 9 in 2021 compared to 30 in 2020, which is a significant decrease. Stand by as I'm emitting Tom. So a decrease there, which is good because we did see some pretty serious gun violence in 2020, some random shootings that our city has not experienced before. So that's encouraging, but also concerning that our violent crime went up a little bit. Also want to address some of the concerns that got brought up at our last meeting. I think Kathleen brought up the fact that our violent crime on this page was a little bit different than the page previously. I talked to our data analyst about that, and that was just basically calls that were classified initially. Calls that were initially came in as like a sexual assault or a shots fired call, and then it turns out that they weren't that what initially came in as. For example, if we got a report of a shots fired, but then the officers arrived on scene and determined it was actually fireworks, we determined if it was fireworks, that call needs to be changed, the disposition of that. And in some cases that did not occur. So it stayed in our CAD and into our records management system as a shots fired call. And it would come up as a weapons violation when in fact it would not be that case. It'd be a checked property. So we've changed that. We actually, Travis just went through some discrepancies with about 5 cases over the last year, and we changed it so that those numbers for violent crime on this page and the previous page match up. Additionally, upon the request that I've been asking, and Cornell, thank you, based on your suggestion in saying that a public safety committee member wanted this disclaimer, I now have it in this report for the definition of abduction, which again, is kind of misleading. So the 8 in 2021, we did not have 8 abductions. Most of those, if not all of them, were related to domestic incidents where we charge the offender with false imprisonment. So that disclaimer is also on the bottom of this page, which helps explain that false or the abduction category, which again is concerning if somebody didn't see that disclaimer. Just trying to look at my notes. If there's anything else I wanted to point out. I think that's it regarding the department statistics, unless somebody has any specific questions.
I have a few, but let's start with anybody in the committee have questions about the data or the underlying incidents? So I don't remember, I mean, homicide's a scary one. So we had an actual homicide in 2021 and human trafficking. Were those related, or are they just two scary numbers that jump out as happen to be in the same year?
Yeah, they are not related, Bartlett. The homicide was a reckless homicide case that I believe I sent all of you a press release on 2 months ago on Terrace Avenue.
Okay.
And the human trafficking, I'm not sure the specifics of that one, but we do get with our hotel rooms in the area reports of human trafficking. We definitely saw an increase in that type of activity and prostitution over 2020 and during COVID. So those are not related. Those are separate incidents.
Okay, so the homicide was the car thing. Okay. So I guess as the chief, when you look at this, you know, I don't know how to say this right. Where are you concerned as far as your officer safety? Where have they run into problems when you're seeing this? What are the numbers that you start going, I need to double check training or make sure my guys are safe, or whatever it is? How, I want to see it through your eyes when you're looking at this.
That's a great question, Bartlett. And it kind of ebbs and flows because, like I said, in 2020, we saw a significant increase of pretty, I think, concerning weapon violations, especially when we had those random shootings where we didn't see that this year. And it really depends on what's going on in society. It changes from year to year. My biggest concern is always domestic incidents. And that's a lot of those, the assault information that you see above is statistically, those are very concerning calls for law enforcement in general, because it's a very heated situation between 2 people, 3 people, a family. And a lot of times when officers arrive on scene, we intervene, we settle the situation down. But then when we make an arrest based on the requirements of the law, so there is a law that we can't just walk away if there's a violation of a law, we have to make an arrest. It's called mandatory arrest. The victim sometimes will turn on the officers. and they don't want to see their partner get arrested. So those are the cases that are concerning to me, is to make sure our staff is safe. And a lot of that comes into play when we do our training. When we do our in-service training, we try to remind our staff of that and be prepared for those very violent situations, volatile situations involving domestic disturbances. So nothing really stands out. I mean, we've had robbery cases since 2019 is low, but we've been as high as 10 before. The sex offenses, sometimes they're higher because of the high school situation. So as you can see, they're low in 2020. That could be a correlation with the fact that we didn't have in-person school. It was all virtual. So when we have an SRO in the school, a lot more of those cases get reported to our SRO that normally would not be reported, because the student feels comfortable reporting a case like that to a police officer that they have daily contact with, where they might not feel comfortable reaching out to a police department and speaking with somebody they're not familiar with. So we'll see increases like that. So nothing that stood out to me, Bartlett, that I'm really, really concerned about. This is pretty typical, and it ebbs and flows each year.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions from the committee? All right, let's move along to complaints.
Hey, Bartlett, just a couple other department updates besides
Sure.
just the statistics. So I just want to let you know that the department is getting close to full strength. I'm leery saying that because we are never really at full strength, but we currently have 3 officers in field training. 2 of them are actually all 3 of them are getting close to being off field training and on their own. A couple of the officers were hired in July of last year, and they're finally getting to the point where they'll be on solo patrol after they completed the police academy and then completed our field training process. So we're really looking forward to getting them back or being closer to full strength, where we can kind of backfill where we've had some vacancies. And I know Captain Kukuski is looking forward to having a schedule that's a little bit closer to full strength, so he doesn't have to try to work his magic and plug all these holes. So we're really excited about those 3 getting out on their own. Our biggest concern right now is our communication center. We had our dispatch supervisor take a job in the private sector a couple months ago. So we're down 1 dispatcher there. And then we just had a dispatcher who's been working for us, for the city of Middleton, for 40 years, announce her retirement, and her last day will be in early March. So we're currently going through the hiring process there and backfilling there, but it's a small work unit of only 6 dispatchers. So to lose 2 of them is pretty significant. So we're really trying to replace those positions as soon as possible.
Cool. So I was talking to Tom Wilson the other day, and he was excited. He gets to go back to be public communication. I can't remember the term, but public facing, I guess, and interaction and all. So that, I guess, that dovetails with 3 people are coming online. That's fantastic.
And follow up on that, Bartlett, for those that don't know, Tom Wilson is primary assignment is our community service officer. We're one of the few departments that assigns a officer to all they do is community outreach. And it's been noted in our accreditation process in the past that we have, of all the departments throughout the state that are involved in accreditation, that we have the most community policing programs. And I think that is so important to continue that, to continue to build those relationships with our community. So we're excited for him to get back into that position full time, so he can focus on events like our Citizens Academy, our National Night Outs, Battle of the Badges, all those programs that really help us build those bridges and relationships with those in our community. So yes, he is going back full time, and I know he's looking forward to it, as we are too.
Great. That really is tremendous. And then I guess just with following up on that, you're about to get 3 officers, and then there's discussion of a referendum, and that's going to increase the available positions if that passes. Is that right?
Yeah, if the referendum passes, that'd be additional staff for us. As you've all heard from me before with our staffing study, by the end of 2023, we should be up another 6 patrol officers. And without that referendum, it's unlikely that will occur. So that will just add towards that number of our patrol staff, so we don't have to look to cut some of the services that we provide to the community.
Oh. So I was just thinking of, like, as tight as it has been, and then you were down 3. I guess it's looking back, you got through it, but wow.
Well, Well, honestly, at one point, and Travis, jump in here, I think we were down 8 at one point with family leave, some other issues. So I think we were down 8 patrol officers at one point last year, out of 21 patrol officers, which is pretty significant.
Yeah,
That's huge.
that's crazy.
Yeah, one factor was one of our SROs was out on family leave, so we had to backfill her position with someone from patrol. So and then had some military leave mixed in there as well. So yeah, it was a difficult year and a lot of overtime. So we're looking forward to getting up to full staffing, close to it.
All right. Any other updates? All right, push us into complaints.
Nope, that's it. I'll stop sharing the screen and bear with me as I try to work my not so good IT magic and pull up the complaint screen. Can everybody see that?
There we go.
Ah, I'm getting better.
All right, I'll take over from here. So we, since our last meeting, had 5 additional complaints that were investigated and closed out. So if you look at it from a point of view of how many calls for service we actually had during that period of time, I don't have that number in front of me, but you know, it's thousands of calls in that 3-month period, and we only are going to be talking about 5 complaints. So I think that really speaks to how we're doing things right almost all the time. But obviously, when we get these, we look into them. So I'll start with the one on the top there. This actually came in on November 15th. And again, the way these work is the reason we didn't share it at the last meeting was because it was still open at that time. It wasn't a closed complaint. So now that it's been wrapped up, we'll share it with you. So this involved a concerned parent reference a fight at our high school. They were concerned with the charge that was forwarded up to the district attorney's office for her son. She thought her son was being treated unfairly because he actually got charged with battery and the other involved female was only charged with damage to property. So we looked into that thoroughly and found that the SRO actually did a really thorough investigation. The report was, I think it was close to like 10 pages. We had 2 detectives involved in this case. They looked at video surveillance from the school, talked to witnesses, and they found that although the female kind of instigated the fight, she threw some water on the student and actually broke his cell phone. He's the one that struck her first and battered her, punched her, and committed the battery. So they were actually both charged. He was charged with, or recommended to be charged with battery, and she was recommended to be charged with damage to property. And I think that's an important point here is when we refer charges, we're not charging them. We're merely recommending the charges to the district attorney. And then they look at the reports and review the evidence, and they determine what the ultimate charge is going to be. And actually, in this case, both charges were dismissed. They were able to work with both parties, and they were happy that things were resolved as they were. So this complaint was closed as unfounded. There just wasn't any evidence that anything was done unfairly in this case, and that complaint form was not returned. The next one came in on December 20th. This is kind of an interesting and odd one. A call came into our dispatch center at about 2:30 in the morning from an intoxicated male subject who very vaguely said that, or alleged that, one of our officers had quote unquote raped a female arrestee who he then identified by name on the phone. And when the dispatcher tried to get some more information, he just hung up and didn't provide anything else. So obviously that was forwarded to a supervisor immediately, and right away that night we tried to call this person back and we're not able to get a hold of them. So the following day we were able to piece together, based on caller ID, where that number came from, who this alleged female was, since she was named. And she was contacted out of state and was very confused while we were calling, and said that she never made any such allegation. Had made an off the cuff comment to some people that when she was arrested for OWI by us back in 2017, that it was like, quote unquote being raped over and over. So she didn't have a very good experience in her eyes. She tried to fight that in court, and it didn't go so well for her. So she was frustrated and was venting, but there was no allegation of any sexual assault that occurred. It was definitely misunderstood, and an intoxicated significant other decided to pick up the phone years later and call us and mention that. So that one was closed as unfounded, but again, that was one of those that we immediately looked into just to make sure that nothing went on there. Any questions about the first two at all? If you do, just raise your hand or interrupt me as I'm blabbing here. The next one on November 21st, this came in as a call around 12:20 in the morning of a person in a residential neighborhood who was not known to the caller, and they could see this person loading some building materials into their vehicle and thought it was obviously concerning, so they called us. As I pointed out here, this particular neighborhood has had some issues in recent years with overnight burglaries and car break-ins. So I think the neighbors are kind of on high alert for unusual activity. So they did call us. The first officer to arrive detained the individual right away. They started to investigate and determine that he was there with permission removing these materials. And once that was verified, he was released. So we had a couple different complainants on this case. The first one was a family member of the person that was detained. She contacted a supervisor in the days after that and felt like this individual was treated like a criminal and treated differently because of his race. So we initially looked into that aspect of it. There was no evidence found that this was anything to do with a race situation. Again, it was a resident who at 12:20 in the morning sees someone at his neighbor's house loading things into a vehicle and thought it was pretty suspicious. He didn't recognize this person from the neighborhood, so he called us. So just on the initial information the officer had, it certainly seemed like something pretty suspicious was going on. So no evidence that anything related to race was involved in this. So as a follow-up, we did contact the actual person who was detained and just kind of to get his side of things, how he felt like things went, and if he had any concerns. And he did have a couple of concerns. The first one being he didn't feel like there was a lot of good communication from the officer. He felt like it wasn't explained to him very well why he was detained. So we looked at that through the body camera footage and interviewing the officer, and we did find that the officer didn't do a great job of communicating with this individual why he was being detained. He did later, after the fact, several minutes later, he did explain to him what the reasons for his suspicious activity were. And then again, later, before his release, they spent quite a bit of time explaining why he was detained. But initially, I would describe it as very poor as far as the communication. So that was a learning point from this. The supervisor did end up reviewing the body camera footage with the officer, and they kind of walked through it step by step and talked about how that could have been handled a little bit differently. The other concern he had was that he was immediately placed in handcuffs, which shook him, as he described it. So for things like this, we follow what's called case law, where the courts have ruled on similar circumstances and what the police can and cannot do. And there was a landmark case, as they describe it, and it's in 1968. It's called Terry versus Ohio. And essentially what this says is that if the police have reasonable suspicion and articulable facts that criminal activity might be going on, they can detain individuals, which would include putting them in handcuffs. So again, in this case, the person is not recognized by this neighbor. It's about 12:30 in the morning, loading materials into a vehicle. It's just very odd definitely some criminal activity could have been afoot. It was not, but they didn't know that at the time. So it was found that the officer was within his right to, put this person in handcuffs. But part of the follow-up was there could have been other alternatives to handcuffs. Not saying the officer was wrong, but we always try to kind of dissect it, look at other things that they could have done differently. The other concern there was that he wasn't released right away, and he was kind of held in a detained status until his story was verified. So again, that was proper by the officer based on the circumstances that were going on. The other thing that kind of fueled the handcuffs staying on maybe even a couple minutes longer was he didn't know the name of the homeowner that he was picking these materials up from. And a couple of things in his story just didn't quite add up at the very beginning. So they were just trying to, until they contacted the homeowner to verify everything, he was kept in handcuffs and detained. He also made a comment to the supervisor that he was in handcuffs for 45 minutes, which was found to be false. It was actually an 8-minute detainment in handcuffs, which obviously I'm not saying that's a short period of time, because I think it's, for someone in that situation, I'm sure that 8 minutes felt like 45 minutes. But they moved as quickly as they could to verify this person's story, and once they did, he was immediately unhandcuffed. And again, that's when they explained to him in more detail, kind of why he was detained in that situation. So this was closed as unfounded, but like I said, there was some learning points here, and the supervisor met with the officer. They had a good discussion, reviewed the video, and came away with some learning points as far as communication, and maybe some alternatives to handcuffs, not just in this situation, but in other similar type situations.
Travis Bartlett has his hand raised.
Yeah,
Oh.
again, if anybody else has something you want to say, but I've got a question.
Sure.
Okay. So with the handcuffs thing, I mean, it's, it doesn't, I don't hear anything threat of harm or anything like that. And the guy drove up and he's loading. I mean, in my image, it's like, stand over there while I figure out what's going on. The handcuff seems pretty aggressive. What is and I get it, there's, legally entitled to, and then kind of best practices. And you kind of touched on that in your education of the officer there, but what is the best practice in that situation?
Well, it's hard to say, because every situation is different, and you don't want to just go tell the officer what you did was wrong, because in his mind, it sure seemed like there might have been like some criminal activity possibly afoot here. He's the first one to arrive on scene. He's by himself, so there are some officer safety factors involved in that. There could be someone trying to flee if they feel like they might be getting in trouble for doing something. So there are some factors of why the handcuffs were put on. There could have been alternatives, which we talked about, have a seat on the curb. We trained some other things. You could sit with your legs crossed. So if someone is going to try to leave, at least you're going to have a little bit of a heads up that they're trying to make a run for it. Because handcuffs are a big deal, and we realize that. And when, like I said, it may have felt like 45 minutes to him, even though it wasn't. So that's why we wanted to just talk to the officer about alternatives and other things that could have been done. But we weren't in his shoes that night. We didn't hear the initial radio call, and didn't roll up there all by themselves at 12:20 in the morning. So
I get all that. I'm trying to visualize the scene, and it's, I suspect it would have been different if it was 2 PM.
I think it would have been, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was processing it. I was listening to it, and I was like, if that was daytime, that might have played out different. But 12 o'clock at night in the neighborhood, and someone's loading something, that does seem really suspicious. It's the time that it occurred that made everything seem really valid to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. If this was at 12:20 in the afternoon, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now. I yeah, the whole nighttime thing adds a different element. You know, for us, if you're out doing things at 12:30 in the morning, I mean, there's a higher likelihood that there might be something going on, and especially, you know, it's pretty unusual to be out loading things into a vehicle at that time of night. It certainly raised some red flags for the homeowner that called and the officer that first got there. But at the end of the day, I think they did have a really good conversation with this person, and he understood why we did what we did, and it was a productive discussion with the supervisor. And they even talked about, you know, him bringing in his, I think it was his daughter, to maybe take a tour of the police department. And so, you know, it ended on a good note, and there was some good communication that came out of this.
Can I just ask a quick question about, you know, the last comment here, like a supervisor met with the officer to review the incident. So
Mhm.
when that happens, when it gets to that point and there were some things that needed to be addressed in terms of decisions or behaviors, does that stay with the officer? Is there some documentation that happened? Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm not talking about the person involved. I'm talking about the officer. Given that there was that kind of conversation, does that conversation get documented that happened?
It does, yes. So as part of this complaint process, that supervisor completed a report. And so it is documented in there that they spent that time, and the officer was, you know, if you want to say, counseled on that aspect of it. So if there was a, you know, a repeat type behavior, it'd be something that would be on record as happening before. But you know, that's why those sessions where you sit down with an officer and, you know, look at their body camera footage, you kind of take it step by step. Those are really valuable. You can learn a lot from it, and, you know, kind of stop it at different points and, you know, have a discussion about, you know, what's your mindset right here as you're approaching the scene. Why don't you just tell me what you're thinking? Kind of take it piece by piece, and then, you know, talk about, you know, putting yourself in this other person's shoes as well, and the alternatives that could have been taken.
So there's nothing that goes in the individual officer's record, just as part of this complaint, the supervisor fills out the form.
In this situation, yeah, there's nothing like will go in his personal file. There wasn't like you didn't like, you know, written up for this or something, but it does go in a complaint file,
Right.
attached to the officer, if that makes
Thank you.
sense.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions on that one? The next one from November 11th. So I think it was our last meeting. We actually had a complaint similar to this one, involving a mother and her 17-year-old daughter. And this is actually the same complainant and the same daughter, and another complaint about how the situation was handled. So in this particular one, there was a disturbance at the house, and police were called. Basically, there was a scuffle over an iPad between mother and daughter. It got physical. The mom was trying to take the iPad out of the daughter's hands. They were kind of one was trying to barricade themselves in a bathroom. The door got shut on their arm. So it was kind of a nasty situation. Officers were called. And the mother later filed a complaint because she wasn't happy with how things played out. She's very of the opinion that her daughter should be arrested when things like this happen and taken to jail. The previous complaint involved, she wanted her daughter cited for or arrested for stealing from local stores. But we'd go to the stores and talk to the managers, and they knew she had a problem with theft that was not able to control, so they didn't want to prosecute her. So in this case, you know, the mom wanted her daughter arrested, and she was upset that she thought the officers were verbally aggressive and didn't take, you know, thorough photos of her injuries or get detailed statements. So the officer actually reviewed this and found that there's no evidence that the officers were being verbally aggressive. They did take photographs of the injuries and documented them, which consisted of scratches and some bruising, again, which was a result of the struggle over the iPad. She also alleged that the officers told her that their goal was not to arrest a 17-year-old, quote unquote, So looking at the body camera footage, there was never a statement to that effect that was made. But they did make it pretty known that they're looking for some alternatives to making an arrest. It's never our goal to arrest people in general, and especially a 17-year-old. So they looked at alternatives, and Briar Patch in this case was an alternative, and they were able to arrange for placement for the 17-year-old there to just kind of get mom some respite, get them separated. And it worked out really well. And we have fortunately not had nearly as much activity at that residence since Briar Patch has gotten involved. They were able to hook the daughter up with mental health treatment, and things have overall been going a lot better. So again, there was no evidence that they refused to arrest the daughter or anything like that. They just, at the end of the day, they didn't feel like it rose to the level of arrest. And we did forward the case to the district attorney's office, and they did agree that arrest was not appropriate in this case. So this complaint was actually closed. It was listed as being exonerated. The officers were. The supervisor actually felt like the officers did a really nice job of looking for an alternative to arrest in this particular case. So for whatever reason, the mom was of the opinion that arrest is the way to go, and that's how the daughter is going to get punishment and treatment. But we disagreed. And the last one, this is a procedure issue from back in mid-December. There was a domestic disturbance at an apartment complex. And after the arrest, the person claimed that the officers took the apartment key after the suspect was arrested, which then prevented her from being able to get back inside her apartment after she was released. She contacted management, and they also refused to give her entry into the apartment. So we looked into this and found out that she'd only been living there for a couple of weeks. She was not on the lease and only had a verbal agreement with the resident there. The supervisor also saw on video that when this person was arrested, she actually gave the apartment key to an unknown third party in the common hallway, and then that person gave it back to the resident. So the officer actually never even had possession of this key to begin with. So this one was closed as unfounded. We also talked to this person about, making sure if you're in a lease agreement that you're actually in the lease and have it in writing to avoid situations like this. So we found that officers didn't do anything wrong in that situation either. So that's the summary from the last few months. Again, five total complaints.
So comment on the body cam. I mean, isn't there a big debate with Madison police about whether to get them or not? But I mean, every time we go through this, it's just eye-opening what you guys get to almost experience what the officer is going through and how much learning takes place about it. I'm repeatedly stunned seeing the depth you get to go into versus just what you hear body cam and images. So
I don't, obviously, money is a factor. There's a lot more police officers in Madison. Storage is a big issue too, storage of all that data. So, money's a factor, but it's been a game changer for us as far as complaints go, because you're able to, kind of take a front row seat and kind of go back in time and see how these things played out. And pretty quickly, in most cases, as you can see, find that the officer really didn't do anything wrong, or you can see a justification for why they did something that they did. Or, in the case of the person in handcuffs, you're able to see that, he didn't really do a very good job of explaining things. And that's a learning point for us. And the officer can go watch it themselves. So it's, from a supervisor lens, it was a game changer.
And I mean, even from I don't think we could in confidence have this review if it was, here's the complaint that came in, our officer said no, it never happened, supervisor backs up the officer, and we're like, well, that doesn't tell us anything. But now knowing that you're at least looking at the video and experience, it gives layers and layers of comfort, at least to me. So I don't,
Right.
is that just a
Yeah.
comment?
Before cameras, you'd have to rely more on, other officers' statements as witnesses,
Mhm.
call other people that were at the scene, other, citizens. We used to have our old video system, which was in the car. You'd have a microphone on in your uniform shirt, but that would start to cut out after you would walk, 50 yards away from your squad car, especially after you would get into a house. So you wouldn't even be able to hear that very well. So yeah, it's definitely been helpful.
The other comment I had is, and I think this is following up on what Kathleen was talking about, is there, I mean, even though unfounded and, or I can't remember what the other term was, but basically unfounded, we're closing these complaints. Do you have a way of kind of mapping which officers are engaged? Are we having spikes, certain officers, whether because they're new or they're rough around the edges or whatever, are having more complaints against them? Do you track that, or do you have awareness of that?
We do. So we keep a running list of complaints. We're able to right in front of you visually see who's got the number of complaints. Unfortunately, I think last year, if I remember right, we had 28. So 28 complaints. It's pretty easy to track. You can see patterns right in front of you. Per policy, we do a yearly review of complaints, look for any patterns, specifically with officers. If one officer has too many complaints, that's something that we would see coming, because it's something we monitor real time, but it would stand out more in a yearly review. So yeah, to answer your question, we track it closely and we watch for those patterns.
Let me just hop in here too, Bartlett, and for others. So we also pair that with the use of force data that we have. We track that up with the officers too. A lot of, especially with the police reform kind of movement that started after 2020, is like programs to track the officers that are concerning, like the red flags. Luckily, as a small department that we're able to really monitor our use of force and our complaints and pair that data up. So like Travis just mentioned, we do a review at the end to see if there's any concerning information based on, in addition to sick leave, that there's some statistics out there that show that abuse of sick leave, high uses of force, use of force incidents, complaints are all red flags that police departments should be monitoring. So we look at all that stuff at the end of the year. We review it, and if there's any concerning stuff, we address it and go in more in depth of looking at why that officer might have more complaints or why they have more use of force compared to the average officer. So great question.
Unless there are other comments, let's move along.
Next up is the use of force data, and I will turn it over to Captain Geyser to explain.
All right, and I'll just add on to regarding those reviews. So we do quarterly use of force reviews, and obviously this stuff helps us review as well. But then the annual review on top of that, and then I do keep track of the number of uses of force by officer per year as well, and keep the averages and all that stuff too. So we do keep a pretty close eye on it. On top of that, I think I know I've explained the process as far as review for each of these incidents. It goes through the primary supervisor who was working at the time. Then it comes to me. And then once I review it, I will actually share my opinion of the incident with the shift lieutenant. And it's the expectation that the lieutenants are keeping track of their own officers too and looking for any patterns of issues. So with that, I'll just also let you know I've done almost completed the annual use force review, but just to kind of put things into context, we're at about 0.24 or 0.25% of all calls for service result in some level of use of force of compliance holder above. So that's pretty low when you're looking at 18,100-ish calls for service, but just kind of put that in perspective as well. So there's not that many here. A couple are included from right before the last meeting we had, just because they hadn't gotten to me or they hadn't been reviewed yet. So these are all incidents moving forward from the last meeting we had here. So There's not too many, as you can see, so I'll just kind of go through each of them real quick here. The first one was actually a pretty significant event where 16-year-old son was about to lose control, is what mom said when she called in. We've had prior contacts with this subject, and we actually have a flag on that address saying that the son physically fights with family when he's disciplined. So the officers got there, actually did a pretty good, actually a really good job of trying to de-escalate. The 16-year-old would not listen to them. He had kind of gone into his room up on the second floor of the residence, and which was right across from a bathroom. So they were trying to verbally engage him, and he walked right past them into the shower. He said, "I'm taking a shower." They actually let him do that. He was in there for several minutes. They waited patiently. He came out and walked past a couple of officers. They didn't try to physically engage him until he actually tried to leave the residence. And then officers did make contact with him in the kitchen area of that house. And it was a very physical altercation, actually, involving 4 officers. And they were able to take him down to the ground, and EMS was actually called because they had to deliver a sedative to him on scene. I think he actually got 2 doses of that sedative, and then he was transported to the hospital. We've talked about that critical incident review board. This one was reviewed. It was kind of borderline as far as policy as to whether or not that was required. He had a bloody lip was the extent of any injury he had. Our policy requires the critical incident review board if there's any injury to a subject requiring medical treatment. In most circumstances, a bloody lip would not require medical treatment. But given the fact that he was so out of control that EMS was called and they did provide that sedative, we reviewed it kind of in an abundance of caution. So as you can see there, the critical incident review board did find it within policy, and there were no referrals. This again is one of those situations where, because it was a pretty significant use of force, well, I shouldn't say it was a significant use of force in the sense that it wasn't a very high level of force. But it was a significant event. So it was one of those where we had supervisors review it and just kind of discuss what other options they might have had, but everything was within policy there. The next one is, you guys probably read about that on the news. There was a rollover crash of a stolen vehicle, actually in the city of Madison, and our canine officer got requested to help track, because I think it said 6 occupants fled the stolen vehicle. Our canine officer was teamed up with Madison officers and ended up locating one of the subjects, and he was hiding behind the air conditioner in the backyard of a house, and he ended up pointing a handgun at the subject until he was taken into custody, and then Madison took over that. So that's what we call an AOD, and assist other departments. So our canine officer will frequently get in those use of force situations if he's called on to assist in those types of situations, because they do. Usually, if our canine is going, it's a pretty significant event. The next one is a deer that was shot because it was very sick. We had actually gotten several calls over several days. Our officers had found the deer, but it was usually in a residential area, and they couldn't take care of dispatching it. But that one they did. That day they did. The next one technically doesn't even fall within our requirements to review. This guy was at the jail. No force above a compliance hold was actually used, but he was escorted. He was kind of pulled away and pushed up against a wall just to stabilize. He was not listening to anything that the officer was saying, just to kind of put that into context. So he was at the DCJ, is the Dane County Jail. So they changed policies a number of years ago where you can't just take the prisoner straight into the booking area. They have to wait outside until a deputy comes to them in the Sallyport garage area. The officer told the subject this, but the door was open, so he tried to walk in. So the officer had told him, "Don't do that," and he kind of looked at the officer and just walked in anyway. So the officer pulled him back and placed him up against the wall until the Dane County deputies arrived a very short time later. The next one is another injured deer it was severely injured, could not even walk anymore, could not keep its head up. So it was shot as well. And then the last one, I'm certain you guys have all heard about, was the event at the high school report of a possible active shooter. So in that situation, we've trained all of our officers to deploy our additional gear, the helmets and rifle plates and rifles. A lot of officers did that. And then they responded to an area. Just to give a few points about that. We're required to not necessarily just deploying a rifle, but actually pointing any weapon at a person is what triggers a requirement for a narrative report and a use of force report. In this situation, most people did not actually point a rifle at anybody. It was just deployed. It's on a sling, and then they kind of held it as they responded there, based on kind of the high profile nature of responding to a school with weapons. We had them all do the use of force paperwork here. So at one point, the officers received information from 2 teachers that the subject we were looking for was absolutely 100% inside a classroom on the 2nd floor. So that's where the officers who actually pointed weapons did so. So the information was, again, a possible active shooter. We had a named suspect and information that he possibly had a weapon. So that's why the weapons were pointed at some students in that classroom. It did turn out, unfortunately, that the subject, it was a misunderstanding of names. So the subject was not in that classroom on the 2nd floor. And then the suspect was actually taken into custody right at the corner, kind of off campus, when he came back to the scene. So taken into custody without incident there. But at that point, there was an officer who pointed a firearm at him as well. So, and I think that's it.
And if I can jump in here real quick, so that one's listed as no CIRB, but I should also tell you that we've done a number of debriefings on that instance internally, but also with the school district administration. So even though it's not reviewed per policy for our CIRB team, it has been reviewed and a lot of debriefs have occurred regarding the instance. So just wanted to add that information.
I would expect whatever, that's got to be number one fear and adrenaline rush you guys get as school threat at the school. I can't imagine anything quite that level.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we obviously took very seriously, and unfortunately, we scared some staff and students for sure. And it's easy for me to say I'm a biased person, I'm a police officer, but I guess the way I look at it is that's the way I would want the officers to respond if it was my kids in that classroom, because we've all seen what can happen if you don't. An example there is the Michigan incident recently. It's not taken that seriously.
I would agree to that. So thanks for all that you guys do.
Certainly.
Well, thanks for this. This is always informative.
No problem.
All right. Any last questions on complaints or use of force before we move on to new stuff? All right. We asked for a discussion. I think it actually came out of bicycles and then went into traffic and then went into other stuff about what I called absolute enforcement of laws. And it's that there's a law in the books and then there's what's happening in the street, and how is that gray area, or how is that determined? It's kind of the thought process behind it, like my inquiry. Chief, you want to kick us off, or do you need me to carry it out any further?
Yeah, I was going to kick it back to you, Bartlett, as this was your agenda item of,
Sure.
I mean, we can tie it back, or we can tie it back into the number 5, so I had to move everybody off my screen, but Tom's concerns with the discussion of bicycles, we could probably pair these together if you like, but yeah, I'm not quite sure of what you want to discuss regarding this agenda item.
Okay, I mean, literally okay, quick story, and I'll keep it short. When I was in law school, I went to I won a dinner or something. We watched, oh shoot, what's it called? To Kill a Mockingbird. And we had 2 federal judges there who started arguing that said, he has this whole, and if you don't know it, but the lawyer stands up and he's defending the client, who is a black man, and the the crowd was coming to try to rescue him, and he's, staying there with a gun. It's this whole, lots of tension and all. And her point was the police should never have arrested the man involved, even though there was a crime. And my friend and I, who are law students, so you're very, young and wet behind the ear and all that, are like, wait, there's a law. Police should enforce the law, and then the judge, then justice happens after that point. And she's like, nope. In order for justice to be in our society, every step of the way has to have some discretion, or we get locked into rules that don't make sense in certain instances. That's from too many decades ago. But it came to the fore when we're talking about the bicycles. And then I was thinking about speeding. I think I had a call with talk with one of the officers. It's like, oh, I don't even want to stop anyone for under 5 miles an hour, because it creates heartache and it's just a mess and no one really benefits from it. And that's not what I'm here for. And I was like, okay, well, how are we making this decision? I mean, where is that wiggle room, and how do we address it? And when does it get out of control? And that's really, I just kind of want to have a brief discussion about it to see if, am I the only one who thinks about it? Is it something the officers think about? Do you have guidelines? How does this stuff work when we actually get to the streets?
Yeah, a lot of good information there, Bartlett. We have policies and procedures. We do have guidelines. We do give officers a lot of discretion, because we don't want them to get into a situation where they're mandated, like we see with domestic incidents. And I think overall that was a good change many years ago, where officers are mandated to make an arrest, or they hit a certain threshold for speeding and they have to write a ticket, but the individual that they stopped had a valid reason why they were speeding. Going to the hospital, their wife in the passenger seat is delivering a baby. They have a sick child at home. There's a lot of different reasons why somebody might be violating the law. And I could see issues if we said every single time you have contact with someone who violates the law, you have to make an arrest or you have to issue a citation. So there is a lot of discretion. We do have policies and procedures. I think some of that oversight we have from our supervisors is they'll randomly look at body worn camera footage or squad footage to see if officers are doing things right, interacting properly with citizens, using good communication skills. So there is a little bit of that accountability that way. But yeah, I guess I'd be interested to hear from others on this call if what their thoughts on this topic, and if they think there should be more strict guidelines. But the officers do have quite a bit of discretion.
I'm all for officer discretion. Sorry, trying to get the word out. As long as it doesn't lean into a sense of like, sorry about my dog in the background, over sense of bias or anything. Because I remember always hearing about the 5 under thing with speeding, and I think it could be an urban legend. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Because apparently the 5 mile thing was because of a margin of error between cars, and sometimes the radar gun, and at that point you get into weird arguments about it, is what I used to hear about it.
I have not heard that one, Cornell, about the air.
And I think part of my thinking is exactly what Cordell raised, which was kind of you don't want to get into a sense of bias, the implicit bias and all that. And I could just see, we don't stop for speeding, we don't stop for speeding, we don't stop for speeding. And then you get 4 or 5 people pulled over, black males all stopped, and you go, well, you're being racist. There's no judge, right? There's no way to say, well, we actually tell our people this. We stop, we're extra careful on speeding at this time frame and this time frame, or I don't know. It's kind of when you get into discretion, we're also talking about the public eye, and with bias involved, it gets a little twitchy. I clearly, I don't think exact, 100% enforcement is an answer with anything. But then I also think with the speeding, like there was the accident with the kids last year in the town of Middleton, I think. And it's like, well, if there's no one ever stopped speeders there, and the guy's like, oh, this is a speed zone, do we start having a public safety issue? Because people are like, oh, no one ever enforces that there. Let's go do our stuff there. so I guess that's Chief, it's really trying to get to that, to make it a conscious awareness of this. And then how do we inform our officers and keep control that, like, now folks, we'll let you get away with, minor violation, whatever, depending, but the laws are the law. I don't know. I can't even articulate it because it's so fuzzy.
I think, and I see Tom's unmuted, he'll probably have something else to add to this, but just quickly, I think having that restrictive guidelines would create more of the complaints that we just reviewed, more issues for us. For example, until about a year ago, we had a pretty strict speeding policy that it says at a certain point, an officer has to issue a citation. They don't stop until it reaches this threshold. That actually created more issues for us by having specific guidelines, as citizens were upset that they thought we should have been enforcing that law, that number should have been lower. So sometimes having specific language, specific guidelines, thresholds can create a lot more issues for us. And I think it would generate a lot more complaints if an officer didn't have that ability to say, you have a legitimate reason why you're speeding and I'm going to give you a break. Because operating on the roadway without both headlights working is a violation of law. I really don't want my officers issuing citations to folks that have a headlight out, especially this time of year when they just blow out because of the cold weather. So that discretion, I think, is really, really important for my staff to have. And I think, again, we have enough oversight and accountability with our staff, and we hire really smart and great people who they're not out there to issue tickets. And we just want to build relationships and be a partner with our community. If we're writing tickets all the time, that's not going to be possible.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Me?
Whoever spoke up, because otherwise I'm going to.
Tom here. Well, you go first and then I'll go.
All right. So I think, to that point, and I think you're getting to the heart of where I'm going, or I think I'm going, because I'm struggling with this, is a clear policy or guideline that's communicated, which is our job is public safety. Our job is to keep you folks safe, not to write stupid tickets. And so within, that when you start crossing and we think it's affecting public safety, which may be speeding, it may be the lights out, we have absolute right to intervene. But we're not going out of our way to just ding you for every little bit, because they're all guidelines for us to get through life together. And I think I'm going through this with company stuff too, vision statements and all that. But if we come back to the core purpose of what you're here, which is keeping us safe and taking the heat when things get out of control, and trying to de-escalate those situations, that is the core of what you're doing. And so how we articulate that within the department, or maybe it's the Middleton Council has to come up with something, whatever, to really say, this is the primary goal, this is what we're doing. The laws are there to inform that, but we are deliberately providing discretion on when to enforce. And maybe it's implicit in everything, but it seems like there's utility in creating that kind of statement or vision or something. And maybe I'm just too far gone, so it's okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. So when I brought it up, I wasn't suggesting that everybody who's not registered their bike be ticketed or fined or whatever. But what I wanted to know is it no longer necessary? Is it no longer useful to register a bike? Does it help at all in recovery? And if it's no longer needed or useful, why are we doing it? And should we ask the city council to take that requirement off the books? I think that's different than the discretionary speeding ticket. I think it's more whether or not this is useful in recovering stolen bikes. And I would be curious to know, I know Madison recently stopped issuing the sticker, and Middleton, I don't know how long it's been that Middleton hasn't issued a sticker. I was surprised when I registered my last bike that I no longer get a sticker to prove that it's been registered. I would think that would be useful in recovery of stolen bikes. And I have had stolen bikes in Middleton that never were recovered. Does that make sense? I mean, I think we're going off a different direction.
Well, I think yours kicked my thinking forward. Like, this is an example, and I bet there are 20 other laws that are never enforced. So like, why do we even have them anymore? And I don't have the time to go through, or nor the interest in going through the whole, lexicon of our laws in Middleton. But, this just kickstarted my thinking. So yours is a very micro thing. Like, this is it useful or not? Do we ask the council to take it off? That's a very specific thing. Like, it's legit. How do you retire laws, right? And then from that got me just thinking on this overall thing of like, and how does that apply to everything else we have out there? It's, so how about this? I have raised the issue. If anybody would like to discuss it further, I'm welcome to discuss it or welcome any further discussion, but I just want it kind of in the rattling around people's brains, especially you, Chief. And is it something we need to be a little more formal, direct about, a little more conscious of how we're doing it and communicate that? And we can raise it or return to that discussion at any point if we want. And then, so I will pause, see if there are any other comments on that section. Okay, hearing none.
And
yeah.
So is it difficult to produce a report just showing how many people actually do register their bikes each month?
Well, let me pause on mine first, Tom, and then we'll finish up with the bike.
Maybe
You're jumping a little bit ahead of where I wanted to finish. So I was on this philosophical screed. So on my bit on the wiggle room and the discretion, are there any other comments? Otherwise, I'm going to close the discussion on that. Great. Okay, I'm going to close the discussion on that.
Before you do that, you raised some points about the mission statement, value statement, stuff like that. We have that. We also have a code of ethics that when an officer is sworn in, they recite it with me at their swearing in ceremony. And our policy is pretty clear with our value statements. And I think that is a culture thing that starts with myself, Jeremy, and Travis. And I think we're very fortunate that we've had some great leaders before us that instilled that in our culture. And you raised some great points, but I think we have that. So that is part of our department, and that is part of our policy and our again, mission and value statements. I just wanted to raise that and make sure everybody was aware that we do have that in our department.
Great.
And Chief, from my standpoint, still the new guy on the team and the group, looking at the way that the complaints are kind of handled and the complaints that are coming in, I kind of see a nice synergy of the fact that the officers are doing a pretty good job because the amount of complaints that we're getting in the way that they're handling it is so low. So it seems like they're not like overly being we are the law and making a hard line. So it kind of, for me, they come off with not knowing all the officers. The reports help me to feel like they're rather personable and they care about our public safety. And they're not just trying to quote unquote catch bad guys or give tickets or whatnot. So I feel like these meetings help to reflect that a little bit.
And Chief, too, if I can just hop in here real quick, just to kind of touch on something that Bartlett had pointed out. We actually have a policy separate from everything else on specifically discretion. And I think it does kind of address some of the concerns you had. But it says policy of the Middleton Police Department that all officers shall preserve the public peace, prevent crime, detect and arrest violators of the law, and protect life and property regardless of a citizen's race, sex, religious affiliation, or national origin. And then it goes on to say they're all equally responsible for enforcement of laws and ordinances, recognize that police officers exercise discretion in law enforcement duties. However, such discretion will not be based on bias, prejudice, or otherwise discriminatory in nature. And then it goes on in more detail there.
I pulled it up. So I guess that it's, yeah, I'm reading that. That's good. Then with the captains, I guess, and the chief, obviously, do you get to the point where you put a point of emphasis out, like, let's just use speeding because that's easy. Speeding's getting a little out of control for the next 3-month period. I want everybody to focus on that a little more to try to tamp that down. Is that part of your regular practices? Is that something you're looking at, the pulse of the community kind of?
We do, if we get right now, we get a lot of complaints about speeders on Branch Street because of the school. So we do pay extra attention in that area when the kids are walking to school. It depends on the complaints. Kind of goes back to some of the staffing issues that I brought up earlier, and then many of you have heard from me for the last year or two, is we just don't have the staffing to do a lot of those things when we're going from call to call or answering calls for service, which are 911 calls or people calling in our non-emergency line. So yeah, we definitely do that, but it also boils down to sometimes we can't do it. We can't sit on Branch Street all the time because we don't have the personnel to do it because of the shortage that we have. But yeah, absolutely, Bartlett, we do that. If we get complaints on Stonefield Road, we get complaints about speeders or people running the stop signs. We then make a point that is extra patrol in the area for our officers, and that's followed up on by our supervisor who's in charge of our traffic complaints.
Cool. Thank you for the discussion. All right, Tom, let's turn it over. We got the stats up on the bicycles.
Yeah, well, it's obvious that most of the bikes in Middleton are unregistered because I bet I could go to the bike store and find out that they sell a few hundred bikes a year. And then there's bikes sold in Madison to Middleton residents. So I'm guessing that the 20 to 30 bikes that are registered each year, that's a very, very small percent. Also interesting is how few bikes are recovered. Like we're looking at a period of about 8 years, and I'm seeing only a handful, 4 that are recovered. But I guess, the question at this point is would that, is it worthwhile to encourage people to register, or should we drop registration altogether? I think that's where I'm curious to, I don't know if we had a big push to register bikes, if we went to the local bicycle vendors and asked them if they could help let people know. Maybe people don't even know that they need to or are required to register their bikes.
Tom, is your preference to actually get rid of the registration, or is it to amplify that there is a
My
law?
preference is just to have a discussion because I don't know. I'm not educated enough to know whether or not registering bicycles make a difference. But if it doesn't make a difference, then I guess we're wasting our time and we should ask the city council to remove the requirement. I think the discussion, so I don't have a I'm not going any one particular direction. I'm just trying to understand why it's not being encouraged, and if there's no need to encourage it, why we're not just, we got to, we have a law that we're not enforcing. There's a law that says we must re-register our bikes. So, I mean, that I think, why have a law if we don't intend to enforce it?
So would another option be to just change, and I don't have the law in front of me, I apologize. But if the language has changed to you must register to we highly recommend, because maybe that if someone is worried about their bike and they want to register it,
Yep.
we encourage, and that way it's still an option. If someone loves to register bikes, I will go register mine. I still think I said this the last time. I have to work on that. But, maybe if we just change the verb tense, that might soften it, or we could remove it, but I'm open-minded.
Yeah, I think either of those two, options are worth discussing. And if if registering bikes is helpful, I think it would be helpful. I would have just had my serial number to report, so I could have, you don't realize I had a bike that was not that old. It was maybe like 6, 8 years old, and I couldn't get the serial number from the truck store that I bought the bicycle from. And had I been encouraged to register that bike, if that's useful in recovering bikes, having that serial number, then my guess is it's somewhat useful. Whether it's useful enough to justify the time and attention, I don't know. But I think I'm guessing that the optional rather than the required registration makes a lot of sense, especially since we haven't enforced that probably ever. We probably have never fined somebody for failing to register their bike, I'm guessing. And that's fine with me. I don't think that's a problem.
Tom, I provided the ordinance to you. Do you want to take a look at it and then give me some suggestions, and then I can pass it on to the L&O committee for discussion?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I guess operationally, does it impact you guys at all? Or is this just somebody calls in, it goes, or it's an online form even, right? So it's there, it's just a registry.
Yeah, it does not impact us at all. But if Tom has some suggestions for the ordinance or what should be changed, I'd be happy to listen. And again, that could go in front of the License and Ordinance Committee, and they can make a determination if they think the ordinance needs to be changed.
Tom, go ahead.
Can I ask if any of the bikes that were recovered in that report were recovered because they were registered or they knew the serial number?
I don't know the specifics of that, but I would guess that was probably one of the factors in getting the bike returned to the owner.
Okay.
I really like Emily's suggestion, and that makes it really easy.
I think Emily's suggestion is good. Yeah. I think in addition to that, though, that would also create some awareness that it's an option. I mean, some people probably don't even know it's an option.
So Tom, did you want to take a look? Sorry, Bartley, go ahead.
I was going to say, is this something we need to make a motion on, or is this just you just take it to the L&O, say we had this discussion? What do you guys think?
Jeremy, you staff the L&O committee for the police department, so your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it would require a recommendation. I would think that a vote is probably in order for this, just to kind of tell you guys how that process works. So License and Ordinance would review it. If you're talking about something as simple as a word change, it's still going to require, I guess, not that it would be difficult, it would require a significant amount of work. It's going to have to go to L&O. City attorney is going to have to adjust that ordinance. It's going to have to be published in the local newspaper. It'll come to L&O for vote if they agree to take it up, and then it has to go to council for final approval, and then it has to be changed by our city clerk. So it's not a difficult process, but it's a relatively lengthy one.
Emily?
Quick question. I'm skimming it. I might be missing it. Is there actually a fine if you don't register your bike, or is just your bike's just not registered?
So anything that's addressed in ordinance, there's a default fine. I want to say it's $50 plus court costs, which ends up being in the $100-some range. Yeah, I would bet that we have never ever issued a citation for it, but it's there.
It's the bottom thing. Emily, you have your hand.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Is it something that we need to make, like at least notify Bike Petty, the committee on Bike Petty, because they might want to take a look at it before it goes to L&O or vice versa? Any thoughts?
Personally, I would think that Bike Ped would probably be a better start than License and Ordinance. Sometimes, sometimes things, ordinance changes jump straight to L&O, and then others are asking why it's an LNO before it goes to some of those other committees, same with the parks related stuff. So yeah, I think that would probably be a better option, and then they can take a look at it and see what they think and send it to LNO if they want to do that.
So again,
So
Tom, would you go ahead? Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we just give our the PSC says we would like to have this reviewed and converted into a voluntary approach. But then let it just go out and let the, what do you call it, the petty whatever it was, the bikers, let the bike committee look at it and see like, oh yeah, we can do it voluntary, and then let the recommendation go that way. But I think that would be enough for us, because I'm with Tom. It's just, this is weird. Like, do this thing, and if you don't do this thing, you'll get fined. And then we sit there and we stare at it, nobody does the thing and nobody gets fined. It just feels wrong. So I would like to make the motion that we ask our staff, our captain, to go to the proper committees to raise this, that we would like to have this converted into a voluntary program.
I second your motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by raising your hand and or saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Chief, Captain, if you guys can make that happen, that would be great. And then I guess eventually Emily can vote on it and report back to us. All right, let's close the discussion on that and move to Marymount facility.
All right, to give everybody a quick update on Marymount. So since the beginning of August, when they kind of opened up their facility, we've had 36 calls for service. They currently have about 8 to 12 beds. We were told about a week ago, only 8 to 12 beds currently being occupied on a regular basis. Their goal is to get up to 72 beds. That is full capacity. If you didn't hear, recently they were purchased by Summit BHC out of Franklin, Tennessee. And this is a company that now owns 31 behavioral health and addiction facilities throughout the country. So a little bit more than behavioral health, who previously owned Marymount. Obviously the 36 calls for service is a little high for the short period of time that they were open, but a lot of that has to do with new staff, people just graduating from college that are now working with people going through a mental health crisis. Just some growing pains that we've been working with Marymount staff to try to address. We've been in constant conversations with them. Travis is actually our liaison, and we've had a number of meetings with them to address some issues that we've encountered since they've opened in August. So again, 36 calls for service is a little bit more than I would like to see at this facility. But I think we're heading in the right direction. The unknown again now is that the new business acquiring Marymount and what that will mean in the future for clients that are going in there and as a business in the city of Middleton. Any questions on that? I guess Travis, feel free to add any other information regarding Marymount.
Well, I just had a flip there. You guys are being called to help out Marymount, where I thought the hope was they were going to help you guys, so you're not driving all the way up north, and they had more mental health help right here in Middleton.
Unfortunately, we are still traveling quite a bit to Winnebago. What we found out is they do not conduct emergency detentions on individuals who are violent. So as you can imagine, a lot of individuals who are going through a mental health crisis have episodes like that. So Marymount will not take patients that display that type of behavior. They also don't take individuals that are sex offenders, and there are other requirements that they don't take at their facility. So some of the calls we've had have included individuals that have been transported from outside of the county to Marymount, and then they'll become violent, and then it becomes actually our issue to deal with. So we've actually transported people out of Marymount to Winnebago on emergency detention. But again, those are some of the things that we're working out with Marymount. They've been very willing to sit down with us to address some of these issues. And I think hopefully as they get staff with more experience, that some of these calls for services will lessen. And Travis, I see you've unmuted. You can probably add some more details.
I just echo what you said. I feel like they want to make it work, and they're determined to do that and work with us. We pointed out a couple of things that didn't go so well. Again, a couple of meetings, and they've made some changes after those meetings. And I would say right now the trend is the calls are going down, but yeah, the concern is what happens when they're actually full and they have 72 beds in a juvenile area and a detox area, and kind of what will that look like. So we'll see, and we'll keep working closely with them.
Okay. I'm going back in my memory to when this was a whole thing, and I had people in my neighborhood really upset about a mental health facility coming in right behind my neighborhood. And oh my God, the poor kids and all this. And their pitch, as I recall, to the community and specifically to the council with the planning and all that was, we're going to be able to help the police to receive people who are in mental health crisis. This will be a good thing for the community. Let us build. Emily, were you part of that? Do you remember those discussions?
Yes, actually, that was my first vote on council. It's my first day. I really thought that there would be concern, people vocalizing at the meeting. Everybody was very supportive because of that pitch. So you're spot on.
And Cricket has her hand raised.
Yeah, I was curious about, so they still are technically taking people. There's just limitations on the people that they take. Is that what I'm understanding? Is there still an agreement between the department and Marymount to bring people there if they fit the particular criteria?
We don't have an agreement with Marymount. So when we have somebody going through a mental health crisis, we contact Journey. Crisis is what they're also known by, and they help place individuals, whether it's at a local hospital, it might be at Marymount, it might be at another facility. So we don't have any agreements with Marymount. It's wherever Crisis or Journey recommends the individual goes to get treatment. It might be Marymount, but we're seeing right now for our staff, and Travis, help me on this, I think we've only had one case from Journey or Crisis that has been referred to Marymount, and I think they didn't meet the criteria, right? We had to remove them. Help me out with the specifics on that.
I'm pretty sure that's accurate. We haven't taken people over there to any extent yet, but we do put it out there as a reminder to our staff that is an option in our backyard. I do think that some of the early issues we experienced maybe it was a bit of a turnoff for some of our staff, and they maybe looked at other options, but we've tried to let them know that Marymount has made improvements and it's still a valid option for us.
Go ahead.
I do have another question.
Yeah, go ahead. Cricket, you muted yourself.
Thanks. Okay. One more question was, when you do bring a person there, my understanding is that Marymount is a for-profit agency, and I'm curious who. I know when you bring a person to Winnebago, it's covered by the state, the cost of that visit or that stay. In this case of Marymount, when a person is brought there, I'm assuming against their will if the police are bringing them there, who then is responsible for the cost of staying at Marymount?
They take involuntary and voluntary patients. So that, just to clarify that, I think you said that they're usually kind of forced in that facility. That is not always accurate. That is not an area we get into, is the billing. Our only concern is getting them the help that they need. So that, as far as billing and who pays for that, that is not something that we ever get involved in.
So, okay, well, I guess as far as where we are, thank you for the information. Outside of this board, I may have some other things to follow up on, Emily. I don't like it when somebody promises they're going to do something and that's how they get it passed and then they don't do it. That just irritates me.
Well, you know, I hear what you're saying and I concur. What I would say is part of the issue might be if some of the incidents that they're having to transport to Winnebago is that they're now becoming violent, so they accepted them. I mean, so there's a couple different pots of issues, but for that pot, I would say that the baseline, unfortunately, is that they opened up into a pandemic, and these cases of violence may not be a normal baseline. The other thing is people where they would have been pre-pandemic, they might have been more reasonable. Staff, if they were already there for a few years and known each other, they might have like said, hey, you know, maybe you need a break or maybe I need a break before we help this next person. You know what I'm saying? So like you'd have a routine down so that staff is new in a pandemic as well. So I am disappointed to hear that. However, I'm trying to be graceful because if the staff opened up like as a team during the pandemic, they haven't had time to gel. They're now about to be, you know, new employees with a new company. There might be some staff change. I would hope that they would get some de-escalation training. I'm sure they already have, but maybe keep going over those kinds of things so that our officers aren't being pulled to Winnebago for people who are here from truly from out of county, like, and we can't call those counties to say, hey, take your person out. That's unreasonable. But maybe there are some small things that the company can do, especially the new company coming together. And I would hope that we are hopefully coming out of the pandemic and that that would give time for people to come together, both the staff and then hopefully the greater Wisconsin as well. You know, the 5 counties that it supports, people will still struggle in the near term with things that have been bubbling up under the surface for these last 2 years. But one would hope that in time, the struggles that we all have had as part of the pandemic will come to pass and people will continue to get treatment when they need it. So, and a few things going at once, but my hope is that the new company taking over will be very responsive and will continue to work with our local police.
And just let me clarify, those 36 calls have not resulted in every one of them going to Winnebago. That includes ambulance calls, a lot of 911 calls. All the patients have access to a phone there. By federal law, they have to have access to a phone. For an example, I think this week alone, we've had 2 or 3 calls from one patient there alone, calling 911 that they have a stomach ache. But our staff, in many cases, still has to respond to make sure that there's no issue. So don't take those calls as that everyone ended up with the Middleton Police Department transporting somebody to Winnebago. That is not the case. It's 36 calls for service that our department received. An ambulance responded, a police officer responded, or a combination of both. But again, they are doing their best. They've been very receptive to the feedback we've provided to them. They want to work with the city. They want to be a good neighbor in business. So we're really hoping as they get more experience dealing with individuals with mental health, going through a mental health crisis, that a lot of these calls will be lessened as we move forward.
Well, thank you for the discussion. And if we could leave that on the agenda, I mean, since it is a splinter, I guess, let's just check in on it quarterly. Anything else we want to discuss from this meeting before we do a quick call for agenda items? Okay, very active group tonight. Okay, any agenda items? I mean, and obviously you can get these to the chief, I think it's 2 weeks or 10 days before notice. But anything anybody wants to bring up for next time beyond the Miramont facility that we just talked about? Yes.
One of the things I kind of have a question about is the protocol and the steps that you go to when you get a call at like a private residence for someone who's mentally disturbed, and how do you approach it, and where do they potentially end up? Because that's a spot that's kind of close to me of understanding how that's handled. So that's something I would like to just go over.
It's a great idea.
Definitely, we'll get that added.
Kathleen?
It'd be great to talk about SROs again. I know that I saw that I think the school district approved next year's contract. I know that there was going to be this evaluation, and I'm not sure if I know what the outcomes were. So if we can just sort of touch on that again next time.
Mhm. Great. Tom, anything you want to throw in the pot for next time? Emily, Cricket? Okay. I will.
I want to
Yeah.
add some thank yous.
Mhm.
I want to add some thank yous. And the reason is that it wasn't a complaint form, but it kind of mimicked some of those issues. But we had an unusual situation sorry, I'm just going off a little topic, but we had someone knock on our door at our house at like 1 a.m. And we thought it was like the kids in the county, whatever that we all see on social media. So my husband was working because he works nights. So he had me call the police, and I want to say thank you because the dispatcher let me know that there was a silver alert for someone in the neighborhood, and they had been notified from other neighbors as well. So she just let me know that since she knew the road, that it was more than likely the person who was missing, or they were looking for them. So, and I let the other neighbors know the next day, and I told them how great the dispatcher and the police were. So just so you guys know formally, thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Tom? Are you muted, Tom?
I'm muted. Thank you. I'm kind of a klutz. Would just something about an update from the bike committee or response from the bike committee, would that be justified as an agenda item? I don't know.
I think it would be if I guess, yeah, Captain, if you could just say where we are in that process and if we've gotten a response, just so we know.
Yeah, we can definitely send an email to them, just notifying them of the content of the request and see what they say.
Great. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Bartlett, can I jump in here real quick before we adjourn?
Man, you will not let me close this meeting.
Real quick, I'm going to throw a plug in for our Citizens Academy. So we are definitely going to do our Citizens Academy this year. We're looking at the start date of March 23rd, I believe. We still have, we're going to expand it a little bit since we've put this on hold for 2 years because of COVID. So we're going to take a few more individuals in our community than we normally do. I think we usually cap it at 12. We're looking at maybe 14, 15. So if you have any interest in attending our Citizens Academy, please reach out to me. As always, there's so many people that go through this and just give us amazing reviews and learn so much about the police department. We have a great time interacting and great questions by the citizens, and people really enjoy it. So please, if you're interested, reach out. We have a few spots available. Bartlett, I hear you're on the fence if you can make it work. But Wednesday evenings from 6 to 9, it's 10 weeks. And I think if you had attended the event, you would see that, again, we just get a lot of positive comments about this program. So if you're interested, please reach out.
Now, I will encourage a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All right. Moved, seconded by Tom. I think Emily made the motion. All in favor? Yay. Okay. Thank you all. Good meeting and report back, I guess, in about 3 months. We'll see you all again.
Sounds great.
Everybody
Bye.
have a good night.
Well.
Bye.